Aftershocks is the 11th episode of the third season of Full House. This is directed by Bill Foster, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I talk about the episode. And this one's a pretty moving episode, and it actually starts off rather delightfully with Joey and Jesse playing I'm a Little Teapot for Michelle, and she dances, and it's very, very cute. We then cut to the next scene and DJ and Kimmy come over. DJ is very excited because she's got her costume for the Christmas play the following day and she's dressing up as Mrs. Claus, but we'll come back to that in a moment. Meanwhile, we establish that Kimmy has been staying there with the Tanners for the last few days because there was some damage to her room after an earthquake. The damage is now repaired. Michelle wants Kimmy to stay longer though, so Kimmy is actually staying another night. DJ then comes downstairs. Her costume is delightful. I absolutely love it. That is the moment though when she finds out that she has a pimple or a zit on her nose. And what's quite interesting is that recently I was watching an interview, I think it was actually Full House Rewind that Dave Coulier does, and he did one with Candace Cameron, and she said that that episode was one of her least favourites, because she felt like it was an episode about DJ being ugly with a zit. And honestly, it's not bad at all. It really isn't a bad episode. People aren't making fun of her for it or anything. So honestly, I feel like DJ is brilliant throughout it. At no point did DJ ever come across as being ugly. I just wanted to point that out. But obviously, I can imagine that when you're, how old would she have been? About 13, and you have to do a story that focuses on you having a zit on your face, I can imagine, yeah, that would have been a little bit uncomfortable. We then cut to the following morning, really early in the morning, and Stephanie wakes up because there's a loud noise outside, and it's just the garbage truck, but Stephanie thinks it's an earthquake. She ends up going to Michelle for comfort, and then dragging Michelle into Danny's room and getting into Danny's bed. Not really sure why she decided to go to Michelle. I think maybe it's because she wanted Michelle, or wanted to blame Michelle for dragging her into Danny's bed, but we already established that she's actually spent time in Danny's bed before because she's been scared for quite a while, for quite a few nights. And it's not immediately apparent why. I mean, it's kind of in the title and the theme of the episode, but we don't really dig deeply into exactly why Stephanie is behaving in this way straight away, and I think that suspense works really, really well. The following morning, DJ comes downstairs with her hair in front of her face, with sunglasses in place of her eyes. Clearly she doesn't want to go to school with this zit on her face. I would argue that you look more peculiar with your hair over the front of your face than you do with a zit, but teenagers are going to do what teenagers are going to do to get through the day. And off they go. Stephanie would rather spend the day with Danny. She doesn't want to go to school, and she's being really, really clingy. And when he comes home, she's even clingier, and she will not let him out of her sight. Unfortunately, he has to go to a business dinner that evening, and she begins to panic and really goes into panic mode, and not quite screaming, but certainly the volume in her voice gets louder and louder as this panic increases, and Danny realises he can't go to the dinner, he can't leave her while she's in this state, so they end up playing Barrel of Monkeys with Michelle, which is very cute. Michelle kisses the monkeys and says goodnight as she puts them in the barrel. Very, very sweet. And Danny asks Stephanie what's bothering her, and she doesn't tell him. She just says nothing. She refuses to say what's wrong. And we come back to that in a second, and pretty much the rest of the episode focuses on that, but very briefly, DJ comes home and she's happy. She had a good day because she realised that everybody gets zits, which I think is such a great message and something that everybody can do well to remember, not just when they're teenagers and maybe starting to get used to getting pimples because of hormonal changes, but anybody of any age, if you have anything on your face that you're uncomfortable about, pretty much everybody at some point has something on their face that they're uncomfortable about. And DJ used comedy to deflect how she was feeling and suggested they play Connect the Dots, and I just thought it was a really nice way to look at the situation. We then go back to Danny, who is talking to Joey and Jesse and is basically saying he doesn't know what to do, and Jesse suggests taking her to see somebody, and Danny says, and I quote, "What do you want me to do? Take her to some stranger and say I can't handle my kids' problems?" And Jesse replies, and I think this is really brilliant. Jesse says, again, and I quote, "No, I want you to say that you love Stephanie so much that you would do anything to help her. And I found that to be really brief but really powerful, because I imagine there are parents out there who might be struggling with their child's behaviour or their child's emotions, and they don't know what to do, but they might feel, for whatever reason, like they don't want to see a doctor. But as Jessie points out, the most important thing, if you love your child, is to do what's best for them and push your own feelings and anxieties aside. And that's exactly what Danny does. And he goes to see the doctor. Stephanie is drawing a picture, and the doctor's kind of analysing Danny a little bit, which is really good fun and definitely helps to put some comedy in there when we need it. And we finally learn that Stephanie was terrified because after the earthquake recently, Danny didn't come home for 3 hours. He was stuck in traffic, and she was scared, really scared, because she didn't know where he was for 3 whole hours. And as Stephanie points out in this episode, she does try to not think about the earthquake, but people are talking about it, and it's on television. And that's not something I've ever really thought about. But it must be really scary. We don't really get earthquakes in the UK ever. I think recently there was part of the country that had like a mini earthquake, but certainly it's not something that's a significant problem where we have to prepare for it and make sure we have enough food and water and things in if there are problems. And it did make me think, though, how difficult it must be to be a child hearing about things like this, or making it a more recent thing, something like the pandemic. Imagine being a child and not really fully understanding it. Granted, most of us fully grown adults didn't understand it for quite a while because it was obviously a very new thing, but to be a young child and hearing everybody talking about it and all of these scary things, but you can't really get your head around it or understand the bigger picture because you are a child. And Stephanie's 8 at this point, and it's fair to say that she's hearing all of this and hearing about all of these problems that it causes. And it just made me think about how children might perceive something that to everybody else, because they've had years growing up with it, they're used to it, they know that they're prepared for it. It's easier to accept it and to understand it. And I think that's really thought-provoking. So if you are the parent or a carer of a child and you're in a similar situation, I think it could be good to remember that the child might not actually fully understand the situation. And on the one hand, that could be a really great thing, because it means they might not be scared of it if they don't really grasp the concept. But at the same time, it could go the other way, as we see with Stephanie. And it could actually be really, really scary because she doesn't have all of the information. And I think that that's a really great point for this episode to deliver. And then we actually get some good tips as well. I apologise if you can hear my cat meowing. She wants attention, as always. We get some good tips in this for what Danny can do if something happens again, such as phoning Stephanie, even if it's not an earthquake, phoning her if he's going to be away. Obviously, today, phoning home is significantly easier when you're out and about than it would have been when this aired in 1989, but there are still some useful tips for then and for now to help make it easier. And I rather enjoyed it. And then we have a sweet moment at the end where they're tucking Stephanie into bed, and then DJ helps to untuck her so she can move a bit, and DJ gives her a goodnight kiss. And it's really sweet, and it's a really moving episode, and I think it's got a really great balance of comedy and stronger negative emotions that we have with Stephanie as she's trying to work through this without really fully understanding things, and Danny ultimately doing the right thing and taking her to see a professional who can help. So some great messages, some really great takeaways, and ultimately it's a really enjoyable, brilliantly done episode.